Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Amina Akhtar. Amina has earned a devoted fan following and wide critical acclaim for her darkly funny and wildly inventive novels. She is the former New York City fashion editor who satirized fashion industry in her debut, Fashion Victim. She has worked at Vogue, Elle, the New York Times, and New York Magazine, where she was the founding editor of the women's blog Cut. She currently lives not too far away from the Sedona vortexes, and Almost Surely Dead is her third novel. And I want to talk about her second novel too, Kismet, which she moved after she moved to Arizona and skewered the wellness culture. I love this. Welcome, Amina.
Thank you. I love your podcast. So I'm really, really thrilled to be here.
Well, I loved your book. Okay, so before I have so many questions, and we already talked so much before, so we're going to unpack it for everybody. But please tell our listeners about Almost Surely Dead.
I don't have my elevator pitch for this, and you think I would, but it's about a woman who, the first chapter, she almost gets pushed in front of a subway train, which if you're a New Yorker, that's like a number one fear, right? And her life just starts to spiral because she's like, oh my gosh, someone's trying to kill me, and somebody's still trying to kill her. And at the same time, you're kind of wondering, is she losing her mind because she might be haunted? And so she's dealing with, like, her mom had just died and she just got out of an engagement, with the guy. So she's really at loose ends trying to pull her life together. And then you start to realize not everything is at all what it seems in this book.
No, it is not. And let's add that when people try to kill her and don't succeed, they die.
They die. And she doesn't do any of the killing. She's literally just like, what just happened? Somebody just did what?
They kill themselves. It's a
it's creepy. It's a very creepy story.
It's a very creepy story. And
it's spooky time in January and February, because that's how we do it.
It's so fun. Plus, did you see that I was like, I'm gonna match this
incredibly I got the
gorgeous
pink going.
You do. You end up on the wall. You are set. Also, we were talking beforehand because I just got the final. I got this is our giveaway copy for those people who are going to participate in the giveaway. And we looked at the hardcover under the jacket, and there's this
look at that
fabulous. This is Dunya. Am I doing that right?
Dunya.
No,
Dunya.
yeah, which one is
Dunya.
it? How do I? Okay.
So the joke in the book is that the main characters, the main character's name is Dunya, and in Urdu and Arabic that means the world, but people call her Dunya, which means cilantro. So the joke is that her name is cilantro all throughout, because I think that if you're Pakistani or Indian, you have to learn to laugh at the name situations that come up,
Right. It's for our phonetics, it's such a small difference to our, our brains. And then it's, so it means the world. And here she is, Dunya, falling.
Because her mental health falls into weird places.
It totally does.
And a lot of the book is based on, it's based on true things. I say that with a caveat. I've not murdered anybody. There was no subway thing for me. But the main character is a sleepwalker, and I actually am still a sleepwalker. So some of the things that she does, I've done. And then her father tells her a lot of folklore from Pakistan, which is jinn. And if you're not familiar with jinn,
tell us.
Because you're not Pakistani or you're not Muslim, it's because it's a very large concept in the Muslim world. Jinn is what you get when you're talking about genies, right? That's where the word genie comes from. They are these beings that are neither good nor evil. They're not angels, they're not devils, they're entirely different thing. And in this book, we start to fall into this folklore and try to figure out, how does this jinn story work and wrap itself into Dunya's life. And those are stories that honestly my dad would tell me as a toddler. So
I love that.
thanks, Dad. Thanks,
In
Dad.
the acknowledgments, you talk about how you watched The Exorcist as like a small child.
At 4 years old. So my dad, okay, I love my dad. He's a little kooky. And his side of the family is Sufi. So he always was really more about the mystical stuff, you know. And so there I am. I have an older brother and older sister, you know, and we're all watching The Exorcist, and I'm 4. I don't know why that was a good idea. I don't know why my dad was like, let's do this. So I'm obviously terrified because toddler. And my older brother is like, oh, it's a true story. Don't worry about it. And I'm like,
Oh,
I'm sorry, what? So my biggest fear as a
oh,
child was that my sister, who I shared a room with, would get possessed by the devil in The Exorcist, and I'd have to share a room with her
fair.
because that to me sounds awful. And so apparently I started sleepwalking, and she would wake up to me standing next to her bed watching her. Which honestly is the freakiest thing I think I've ever done, and I was only 4. But my father
Totally.
is like, oh, I know it's a true story, honey, but I know how to do an exorcism, you'll be fine. And I'm like, oh,
So
okay, so
I
that's the
love
background.
these. I love this. I mean, I'm terrified too. I feel like I saw Jaws when I was like 8 or 9, and I still like can't really swim in the ocean. So but that's a little different. Like I can avoid the ocean. You can't like
Right,
avoid your sister.
can you avoid demons? I don't know. And I like little,
I
like, honestly, first 10 years of my life, that was like my boogeyman. Like I was just
Of
terrified. I
course.
was like, this movie, oh my goodness. And now I can watch it. I can actually watch it now. It's not traumatizing, but
Oh
it's like,
no.
man,
Mm-mm.
Dad, what were you thinking, man? Like,
Yeah.
no.
What did your mom say when all this went down? Was she like, oh,
She's just kind of she let him do a lot of these weird things and just kind
hmm
of went along with it because for her it was already also new to begin with because she moved to the US in 72 when they got married
yeah,
and had my brother, like, her whole life was so brand new, you know what I mean?
yes,
So
right.
for her she was just like, I guess this is normal for Americans, I don't know, you know. And then
Right.
I was like, it wasn't normal, Mom,
Well,
it
there,
is.
I read this book once called The Golem and the Djinn. Do you know that story?
Uh-huh. Oh
Anyway,
no, but I've heard of it.
yes, I can't remember who wrote it, but it was fabulous, and it was my first experience with the whole idea of a djinn.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely love it. So the funny thing about, I mean, so I think of a genie as being kind of like it's going to grant, you know, like just the wish granting part of it, which, you know, I don't know how much of that actually goes back. No, the
Um,
the
I do
djinns,
have stories of my dad's great grandfather, and he was alive. So they were all like 18 when they had kids. So my father was
yeah,
alive when he was alive. He would, and keep in mind, people 100% believe in jinn. This isn't like
yeah, there,
the Easter Bunny and you grow out of it. You mention jinn to a Pakistani person, and they're like, mm-hmm, yeah, no, they're real. I see them. Mm-hmm. They all have a jinn story. Everybody has a jinn story. So my father's great grandfather would, he was a religious spiritual man, and he worked with jinn. He literally would have them in the house, and he would be teaching them the ways of humans. And I was like, oh, okay, that's weird. And then they apparently would bring him butter, you know, which, you know, look, like 1930s Pakistan, that's great. You need your
yeah,
butter. Or India. It wasn't
yeah,
Pakistan, it was India. So like they would bring butter. There were these stories about how I think my father's grandfather, one of them was arrested for murder, and the jinn kept taking the handcuffs off him. Like they couldn't keep him. And he was just sitting there and handcuffs would come off. And he was just like, so
that is
jinn are
fabulous.
just, and like my dad would tell me stories how he would have, there was one room in the house that the jinn lived in, and you couldn't go in except he could go in. So he kept all his toys in there because he was the only one who was allowed to hang out with them. So I've
And
always
that
been
was
like,
like the gin
where
roll.
are
Like
they?
it's yeah, they're like kind
Yeah,
of, I mean,
the
they do
jinn
have
had
a,
that role. Nobody else had the
yeah,
role.
right, right. The gin
So
had the
the
roll.
thinking is they have their own. It's basically like the fae, like fairies. And there are
Mhm.
people who believe that fae are jinn, like all fae are jinn, not all jinn are fairies, that sort of thing. So it's
Okay.
like different worlds and these different
Yeah.
beings, you know, that every culture has. And then you start to like, you know, I had to put in a character, Zabir. I love Zabir. I have to
Oh,
put a
I do
character
too.
in who could explain it because I didn't
Yes.
want it to be like, here's your lesson in folklore, but I wanted
Right.
somebody who could put it in a way that made sense to
Yeah.
people because it can be, you know, it's a whole new, you know,
Yeah.
creature entity that you're talking about. And if you didn't grow up with this, it's like, this is weird, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's not like you're not writing a fantasy book, right? Like you said, this is a real
Mm.
thing. People believe in this. And having
Oh
read
yeah.
that one other book, I sort of knew enough to be like, yeah, this is like real
Oh,
thing. So I
you mean
love that.
the talking murderous ravens in my previous book?
Yeah, exactly.
Listen,
I
I like to
mean,
blur the lines. I like to blur the lines. You
and
know,
I love that.
I feel like, you know, if you're actually being haunted, you're not going to have, it's not going to be like a horror movie, right? It's going to be these little things that are happening and you're like, am I going crazy? Did that really
Right.
happen?
Right.
Versus chairs flying across the room, right? I
Right.
mean, if you're having chairs flying across, that's a whole different story.
Yeah,
But
you
like,
then you really need an exorcist at that point for
yeah,
sure.
but it's like there's these little things that'll happen so that you're just gonna guess and second guess yourself and question yourself. Like, am I seeing this? Have I lost my
Yes.
mind? What's happening? So that's kind of how Dunya comes off, is she's really just trying to hold on to what little bit of
Yeah.
sanity she has at this point.
Right. And she sees that black smoke. I mean, that's the cool thing too, is it's like, and you can imagine if you're almost pushed off off a train or off a, station in front of a train, that there would
Mhm.
be some sort of optical stuff that would happen to you. You'd be a
Yeah,
little bit wigged. So
but
I didn't
she
think,
sees it.
yeah,
Yeah,
then she
it's
starts to see it
subtle.
a
It's
lot.
these little things, and then you start to learn about the jinn, and then you're like, oh God. And
Right.
then there's the backstory of her. So I always
Yeah,
joke
let's
that I
talk
write
about
a
her mom. Yeah.
Hamama. I write I this is my so as a Pakistani growing up here, we call ourselves the ABCDs, right? American born confused desi. And I think
Yeah.
every Asian and
Mm.
immigrant group has
Yeah.
their name for themselves. But it's because you grow up and you're in two different worlds, right? You're in your
Yeah.
mom your family's house, and then you're in, the broader culture, and you can definitely feel like, oh, where do I go? And we learned that Dunya in the very beginning has estranged herself from not just her family, but also her culture. Like, she's
Yeah.
just, she's a bad desi. And I love my bad desis because I'm a terrible one, right? Like, I'm always like, Dad, say that word again. How do I
Yeah.
say that? Okay. You know,
But
he makes fun of me. I'm
she's
like,
not
why?
even like, it's like she was estranged, right? She kind of got
She
pushed
was
out.
she got pushed out, and then
Yeah.
she just never came back. And we're talking, she got
Yeah.
pushed out as a child
Yeah.
because we learned that her father died when she was little, and she happened to
Yeah.
have been present. And I'm not going to
Yeah.
give anything away, but her
No.
family blamed her for the
Mhm.
death. And so the entire time you're thinking, well, what a crazy mother would blame their own child for this, and how could she do that? And then as you're reading, you're kind of like, oh,
Mhm.
wait a minute,
Mhm.
wait, maybe the mom knew stuff that this girl didn't realize. So she has
Right.
to, at some point, as she's grieving, she's kind of learning who her mom really is, and
Yes.
learning how her mom really saw her, and it's different from what she thought. She always thought her mom hated
Right.
her, this.
Right.
And so then you're kind of like, oh wow. It's kind of one of those moments where I feel like, if you're lucky enough to have good parents, obviously this is caveat, not everybody has
Yeah.
wonderful parents. Um, you hit a moment when you're an adult where you're like, oh God, they were right about XYZ.
I
It's
know.
like,
I
and
know.
you want
Right.
to be like, oh God, I want them to be not right. And they were right. And you're like, all right, all right. So it's like kind of toying with that a little bit. Like, maybe she will come to a moment to realize her mother was right, or maybe she wasn't. I'm
Yeah.
not giving anything away.
No. And the other thing about it is I think it's so there is also a point that when you look at your parents and realize they're sort of very human, right? Because there's this
Very human.
we grow up and think, they know everything, or not for us, or we argue with them, but there's this point where we realize that they're kind of as they're doing it the best they can with the tools
I
they
mean, guys,
have.
let's keep in mind that our parents were like our age, right? And
Yes.
I have no
They
idea what I'm doing. And like, they had three kids
exactly.
while they were no idea what they're doing,
Yeah.
So to me, it's like we have to remember everybody's human,
Yeah.
and trying to do the best they can. And
Right.
so, learning to offer grace. And that's one of the things I think, as like
Yeah.
kids of immigrants, I think that we have to learn also, is our parents were doing the best they could, like
Yeah. Think
nobody
about that.
in
Right.
the sick. Yeah, in the 60s, it was the first time Pakistanis and Indians really got visas to come to the US. So me, my brother, and my sister were some of the first generation kids.
Hmm.
And it was different. And I think it's so much different from kids, who are like Gen Z or even millennials. I'm Gen X, I'm a little old. Like there's a difference in how we were raised versus them because we didn't have
Yeah.
internet. We didn't,
Yeah.
every time we would move, my mother would for real open up the white pages book and go through and find every Desi name and call them up because
Oh,
how there was no other way to meet people.
yeah. I
And
love
if
that.
you didn't fit into the image that they wanted of you, of the community,
Yeah.
you were an outcast. And there I was in the 90s with a shaved head, wearing combat boots, being super goth. And all the aunties were like, what is this child doing?
Right.
So,
And think
yeah,
about with you know Dunya's mom, she was also like alone. Her husband had
alone.
died, and
She has two kids.
she has two
Yeah.
kids, and her whole family support system is in Pakistan, right?
Yeah. And there was no real society, community help because
Mm-mm.
everybody didn't want Dunya around.
Right.
And so, you start to realize, oh, her mom really tried. Like, I feel bad for her.
Yes. Well, I
So
want to talk about her
yeah.
relationship with Kendra too. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Kendra.
Yeah.
So Kendra's the best friend. Kendra's her
Mhm.
bestie. They met in pharmacy school. My sister's a pharmacist, so I felt like let me make a character who's not a writer or something. Like
Right.
there's a whole bunch of careers out there. Let's try it.
I
So
love it.
Kendra took her PhD in pharmacology and went into creating a beauty line for,
I
for
know, which
black and
I
brown
love because
skin.
that's kind of also your shtick. You're like twisting all these things
Yeah, I love
using your
beauty.
background. Yeah.
I'm a beauty
Mhm.
junkie. I am a
Me
beauty
too.
junkie. It's like the leftovers in the fashion world, like you might not fit into those clothes and I can't wear stilettos anymore, but I
Right.
will have my beauty
Me
products, okay?
too. I love,
So
yeah.
Kendra's doing all this cool stuff. She's got her own beauty line. And Dunya basically works at Walgreens,
Yeah.
or like the New
Yeah.
York version of Walgreens, Joinery.
Yeah.
And
Dwayne
her
Reed,
day is
right.
just yeah, and her day is just people yelling at her,
Right.
because people are always yelling at the poor pharmacist. I feel so
I
bad
know.
for them.
I know.
And so her day is just like she hates her life. Like there's just nothing about her life that she's happy with. Her mom
I
died. She
know.
doesn't know how to feel. Her ex broke up. She didn't know how to feel about that. She's just this mess, right?
Right.
And Kendra is the exact opposite. Kendra knows
Mhm.
exactly what she wants. She's pulled together. She's, they're just two peas in a pod. And, Kendra has done a lot of things for Dunya in the past, like helped her out as a solid friend. And so when she asked Dunya to come meet an investor in her company, she says yes, because who wouldn't help out their best
Of
friend?
course. Of course.
And the best friend, sorry, my glasses keep falling. The woman that they meet ends up being Liz Small, who is, I was telling Danielle, is the antithesis of the author Liz Little. Liz Little's a good friend of mine. I love her. And I was like, Liz, I want to put you in this book, but I want to have to like make it the opposite of you.
Because she's like
So
a big personality and super like,
yeah,
I
and Liz
mean,
is not like that, and Liz is super chill, and she thought it was hilarious. But I always like
yes.
to ask people, I'm like, can I borrow
Of
your
course.
name? Or
Yeah.
because you're like,
Yes.
like in the last book, Star is my sister-in-law's name. So I was like,
Oh,
can I borrow that? Is that okay? It's not gonna be
yeah.
you. I need a name.
I like the
Um,
name, right?
yeah, it's like sometimes the name just kicks into my head, and that's that. I can't get rid of that.
Totally.
So Liz is just, one of those very wealthy white women in New York who've never been told no,
Yeah.
who have trust funds, who, you know, rule the beauty and fashion industries. And,
Right.
Dunya's never met anyone quite like her. And
Yeah.
having someone like that be interested in you and
Yeah.
wanting to talk to you, it's intoxicating. It
And
can be. And so I
Kendra's
think
so
that's
busy, right? Kendra's so busy,
Kendra, bless her
and
heart.
and
Yeah.
Dunya, it can't work after some event, a specific event, which
One
you
of
have to read the book.
one of the many, many attempts on her life because it just
Exactly.
doesn't stop. Somebody who just really, really wants this poor girl dead.
Doesn't
And
stop.
so at some point she has to stop working. And all it's just it's a mess. She's a mess, guys.
She's
And I
a
feel like
mess.
everyone
But
has been there. Everyone has been a mess, but gosh, she's
totally.
a mess.
She's a mess. But
Yeah.
isn't that funny? Because I love how she's like, now I'm getting my shit together. And then it's like, nope, nope, you're not. Not today. It's just like the
Mm-mm.
rug is like, whoop.
Like just kidding. Yeah,
Yeah,
she tries.
exactly.
She's trying so hard to to get back on, and do things. And
Okay,
God,
there's
poor
one. There's this.
Danya. I really put my characters through it.
I know. Well, I love that. Unfortunately, it makes you happy that, like, I read a book like this and I'm like, oh my God, I love this. And I'm also like, hey, my life isn't so crazy. I feel a little better. I'm like, this is, my life can be a little
You
bit of a
guys are
shit
not
show.
being haunted. Take
That's right.
that as your daily pep talk, all right?
I know, exactly. You look in the morning and say, no gin for me. Thank you very
Yes.
much. And we don't mean the alcohol. Okay. So this quote I love. She's talking actually this is when she's at dinner with Kendra and Liz. And she's like, she said, when she was attacked, it feels like yesterday and forever ago at the same time. I laughed. That's a trauma response, the time thing. It happens to all of us. Before I could ask what she meant, she was peppering me with questions. She wasn't aggressive, not exactly. She was American, a white American. They were allowed to be loud, boisterous, and nosy. Those were all the things my mother never let me be. Even though she wanted me to assimilate, I had to be quiet, do what I was told, and never cause a scene. Liz was the type of person you described as a force. So I love that because it's so true. First of all, Americans in general, we're just like, loud and all out there. You can spot us anywhere. But I want to talk about this white woman thing. So it's like,
yes,
because that is another thing that, if you're a white woman, you don't really appreciate about like being on the other side of it. So what are the
that other cultures might not be able to behave the same way. Yeah,
we appreciate. Tell us about
were
that.
always, there's I think a couple different things to it. First, definitely raised to keep your mouth shut, don't rock the boat. Oh my God. I've always literally, you could talk to my father. I've been like this since the day I was born,
A boat rocker.
And yeah. And my mom was like, my dad told me once there was some woman at the store and I was a toddler and she said something and I was just like, you're a bitch, and I was like 3, and my dad was just going, this child is going to get her butt kicked one day. Like, oh my God, because I had no filter. I was like, oh, I don't like this. And my parents had never encountered, I think, someone like me before. And then all of a sudden I'm born and they're like, what do we do with her? Because you're supposed to be obedient and listen to your parents and do what they want. And I was like, no, thank you. That's not me.
Right.
And it was a learning experience for all of us. So I think that's definitely part of it. That's definitely part of the culture. Like you're not allowed to complain too much. You're not allowed to say, oh, I don't like, the way my auntie talked to me. Like, nope, keep it to yourself because that's just the way they are. And that's that. And I think the other part is other people's expectations of us. Like I used to have a boss who was British and male, and he would get so annoyed if he heard me laughing or just talking to a coworker because he wanted me to be very docile and very quiet. And I was like, well, you hired me. Like wrong, like that was the wrong person to hire. I don't know what to tell you. But I've definitely come across it before where there is, a certain stereotype where they want, and I think in the US, Eastern Asians definitely have dealt with this a lot more. But I think also with us, it's like the British tend to maybe feel this way sometimes, in my experience, where they're just like, oh, they expect this very easygoing, docile woman who's going to wait on you, and it's like, that's really not going to happen. Thanks.
Yeah. No. You hired the wrong lady for that job. Yeah, I can imagine. It's like all the worst rules for women, but like on steroids, right? So now you're you're women and you're East Asian. So it's like you're supposed
I'm South Asian, but yeah,
South Asian. So you're supposed to be like
continent.
I know. I'm like, where is but it's like then you're supposed to be all of those things, and that's like impossible.
Next to India. There's India because they were one big country at some point.
I was gonna say when did they stop being one big country?
1947. Partition happened, and it's wild because both my parents were alive. So they were both Indian, and they're both living in what is now India. And my father, we call it the partition generation. They don't talk about what happened. Like you saw I don't know if you watched Ms. Marvel, where they were showing the trains, and so it was very much like that. Both my parents had to just get on train, but my father was like 13, and he remembers. I get him to tell a little bit, because I'm like, I want to know. I want to know
Right.
what happened. I want to know our history. And it's a challenge because they don't want to remember it.
Yeah, it's
Um,
hard. I'm sure it's horrible.
they he was 13, and his teacher was like, there are men coming to kill you. You have to go.
Ugh.
And he had to go, and he was a 13-year-old. They saw things on both sides of what people were doing to children, and killing them, and
Mm.
it was literally a very horrific experience, for Pakistanis and Indians. And
Mm.
I think that is definitely something that I hope we as writers, and like the descendants of the partition generation, definitely explore a bit more, because I don't think people know that this happened, and it was really, really recent, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
No, that so they
it's
basically
intense.
had to be moved to they went to the place that was
Moved
then
to Pakistan.
designated.
So all Muslims
Yeah.
had to go here, and all Hindus had to go here. And like,
God.
you're talking about places that each, culture was living in for centuries. So
Yeah.
it was very traumatic. I think hundreds of thousands of people died. It was just a
Oh,
horrible, horrible thing.
yeah.
And honestly, I cannot get my dad to talk about it. And so, and there's a couple new books out that have partition in it that I'm starting to read, but it's really intense. Like, you're reading it and you're like, or like, we'll watch the movie Gandhi. My dad and I will
Yeah.
watch it when it's on, and he was there for some of it, which
Yeah.
it floors
And it
me, because it seems like ancient history, but this is my father, like, he was literally
right.
like, oh yeah, I saw Gandhi that day. And I'm like,
Oh my
oh,
gosh, right.
what?
Well, and also it's like it has to be really hard because it's basically happening again, right? The
Yeah.
same sort of thing is happening when in Gaza and Israel, and that has to be
And
super.
but also in India again, like, they are making Muslims second class citizens,
Oh, right.
basically. There's a
Yeah.
whole, and nationalism in any culture, whatever culture it is never good, especially
No.
for, the minorities. So
Yeah.
it's happening again, and it's just like one of those things where you have to let it play out, I guess. But
Yeah.
we've been there before, and we've seen it.
Mhm.
And I think I might be in my next book that I've started working on, is
Mm.
diving into the wedding culture, because we love our weddings. Oh
Oh
my
my
goodness.
gosh. Yeah, that's so
But
fun.
I might have a couple elders who are partition generation, to see if I can work a little bit in.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's wild. It's entirely wild when you're like, oh no, my parents are born in India, but we can't go back there, so it's fine.
That and and that's I mean here obviously our history is so the history we're taught in America is so
Yeah,
narrow and so
tiny.
skewed and so
Yeah.
so like
Listen,
we're
there's some
not
things I didn't even know until I was an
I
adult.
I
You
mean
know?
this is I know but that's like I don't know I mean I love the idea that people that infuse their their fun stories like books we want to read anyway with things that
Yeah.
you just had no idea because I
Yeah.
think
And
that's
I
the
think
way
that
we
there's a way to
learn.
do it without lecturing people.
Yes,
Because sometimes
yes,
there's books that are like, oh, I feel like I'm in school. Whereas I
yes,
want to make it fun. I want people to be curious about our culture.
yes,
Like, my mom was one of those people who was like, if somebody wants to come over and wear my clothes, that's awesome. Let's do it. Oh, you want to learn how
yes,
to cook? Come
yes.
over. Like,
Oh my
she
God.
saw
I'm
it
gonna you
as
need
a
to have a
compliment.
party. I wanna come. I wanna
Come
come over
over. I
and
can cook.
I'm gonna
I can cook.
I'm
So the part of the culture I'm really into, cooking. I can do. So
yes.
once I moved back in with my father, so I moved in with him about 7 years ago, because he's 91 now,
Oh
and my
my
mom had
gosh,
passed
rough.
away, and it was just kind of like,
Sorry.
you need some help at 91,
Yeah. Yeah.
or just somebody else to be there to make sure you turn the stove off. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got to once the pandemic started, I was like, what can I do to keep spirits up? And I basically went through every Pakistani dessert, which is like Indian food basically. It's very similar.
So
Like
yeah.
gulab jamins and kheer, and I literally made every
Mm.
single one from scratch, because I was like, let's have some fun with this. Let's go wild.
I
And
love
so I
that.
keep him fed. I keep him very well fed at this point, because
Well, it sounds like you guys have an amazing relationship. I mean, that is such a gift, right? That you get to
yeah.
be
I
there
want to
and
write a sitcom. I want to write a sitcom about it, because I think it would be really funny we're all aging, we're all having to take care of our parents.
Yes.
And it is always a very odd couple moment,
Yes.
because the parent you knew as a teenager and the parent you know now, they're different. They're different people.
Of
They've grown, they've
course.
changed. Uh, I just think it would be really, really funny to have a sitcom of
Oh, it would
like,
be so
the
funny.
traditional father and then their tattooed, weird child from New York rolls in and like, what's up, daddy?
I
I'm hanging out with
I
you now.
I love that idea. It seems like that's a thing to talk to Mindy about. Seems like Mindy
I
would be
know.
all over that.
Hey, Mindy, I have an idea.
Yeah,
Speaking of
exactly.
Mindy,
Yeah,
this
speaking
is a
of Mindy.
Mindy, this is a
Okay,
Mindy's book studio book.
I know, I love that. So look at that beautiful
Yeah.
little, so tell us about that experience because
Oh,
that's gotta have been just like a
I
total
love
dream.
Mindy. Here,
Yeah.
and maybe it's because I come from the fashion world where stuff like this doesn't happen, right? There's no holding the door open for people behind you. You climb up
Yeah.
that ladder, you kick it over, right? And Mindy
Right.
is the opposite of that. She's lifting up authors of color that she, wants to have more exposure for them. She's
Yeah,
using her fame for good. And I like that's remarkable to me because
totally.
who does that? Who like so few people would do that. And I think
Right.
that's a good example for others to follow,
Oh,
like
I agree.
help each other out. And I think and book world is way better about that than
Hmm.
fashion was.
Yeah.
Book world's been like, you know, the kindest, most supportive place ever. And people are like, but don't you think? I'm like, listen, I come from bad place.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Hear the ring. So I'm already like, oh, I love book world. And then Mindy was like, oh, she likes this book. And I was like, what? This one?
She doesn't like
The
it.
book,
She
the
like
book with the
there
gin and the weird
she
book.
loves it. Where does she tell us like how much she loves it?
Oh,
Here,
there was that introduction. Yeah,
yeah,
she wrote a beautiful introduction.
she is literally like, it's a twisty psychological thriller with themes from the Desi culture that brings a whole other dimension to the story. She's like, I was up all night. I know I read this somewhere. Oh, I was up all night tearing through the pages as Dunia's life and story came together, leading to an explosive conclusion. I have never read anything quite like this, and I'm so excited to publish it as part of Mindy's book studio. I have shivers. I love
I
that. I thought
know, I
she's
know. And do you
so,
know how long I've had to sit on like that introduction? I was like, guys, I
oh,
want you to know what she wrote about this
I
book because
I
I'm
know.
so excited. And it's
I
like,
know
you
the
can't tell
secret.
anybody, right?
Mm-mm.
It's always
Mhm.
that's book world is full of secrets like that. But no, I think it's incredible what she's doing. And yes,
Yeah.
there are there are book clubs out there, what have you, but so
Yeah.
few are focusing on authors of color.
Yes.
Like I love seeing like Sonali Dev and Lauren Thompson getting
Yeah.
attention and getting their books out there because they're brilliant authors.
Yeah.
So to see that happen, it's like, and then to be part of it, it's like,
Oh,
you gotta like me.
you're in the club. Well, and also I think it's so
I'm
fun
hyped.
to read about I love, I mean, this is one of the reasons I
Yeah.
say, I read so much is it's just an opportunity to walk in somebody else. It's like, the man who
Yeah.
lives, a man lives a life. A reader lives 1,000 lives. And I think that is so
Yes.
true. You just get a chance
Yes.
to see things from different perspectives. And I think it's like you talk about our crazy talk about nationalist culture craziness,
Yes.
right? We're in America. And it's like
Yeah. And
we're as fucked up as, anyway, but
everywhere.
it's,
Yeah. No.
yeah, it's
I am not one of those
horrible.
people who thinks that America is the be all end all. I love that I grew up here, but I will say that reading the moment we're having right now in publishing, especially in thrillers, we are getting more different cultures involved, right? We're
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
Latina cultures, we're getting more Black culture, we're getting all kinds of Asian culture, and it's amazing because there's so much more happening within our borders of people's lives, and
Yes.
I loved reading as many different authors as I possibly can for that
Yeah.
reason because it's like, oh, I'll see it a different way, or there will be
Yes.
an experience that I had never ever, considered it being an issue or a big deal, and you're reading it and you're like, oh, okay,
Right.
yeah, cool, yeah.
Because
So
of
for me,
course you
I just
just,
yeah,
sorry. Yeah. You only see it. I
and
mean, you
also
see it from your limited
maybe it's also
perspective.
age, like we grew up
Yes.
with just books. Like, what did you do for fun? We read books.
Yeah. Right.
Like I was
Right.
the biggest nerd. I spent every day, I didn't go any, I was not allowed to go to parties in high school. So I literally every
Yeah.
day would be home reading a book. Like
Yeah.
I had zero life. Books to me
Which is
were and have been everything.
right.
So,
Right.
that I could contribute that to somebody else and maybe they'll see
Yeah.
themselves in this book or they'll learn about a cult, part of a culture they didn't know about,
Yes.
to me is amazing. Like that is just such a thrill. And
And I
Mindy's
just,
making it happen.
yeah,
So
Mindy is, I mean, that is amazing. And I love that she's, that she's giving exposure to this kind of book in
yeah.
your book and books, from other, like you said, people of color.
And I'll be
And,
honest, I wrote this book and I was like, no one's gonna read this. This is
ah,
such a weird book. People are gonna be like, what the heck is wrong with Amina? And so when Mindy was like, she likes, I was
no.
like, really?
But that's because there's
That's
like, we're a little
cool.
crazy, all of us. You're just crazy in your own
Yes.
way, which I love because
We are,
I felt
yeah.
like now I'm like, I'm like going to find myself down the gin rabbit hole because I read that one other book. I love the idea of it. I also love the idea that there's something else out there. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
what I think about
Well,
all of it, but
I became a believer because I
yeah.
had some wild experiences, some of them which made it
Hmm.
into this book. I
Okay.
set all my New York characters in my one old apartment, which was on 89th and First. It was this
Hmm.
great high rise, which they ruined by turning into condos. Um, but it was a great apartment, and so I set Ginny in there as well. But for me, when I'm living in this apartment, and I had Beanie, and you could see little Beanie's head up there.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's my she's
Oh,
snoozing next to me
sweet.
right now
Oh,
because
good.
um so we were hanging out in my apartment and like there was something in there, like I started noticing Beanie's reaction to staring at the wall. So I thought there was a bug in here. So I'm looking around. And then every night I started sleepwalking. And like, listen, I sleepwalk once a month, maybe twice. It's not like I do it a nightly thing. Beanie might disagree, but I don't think I do it every night. I
You
was
don't have
doing
a
it every night.
camera?
And I
You
was
don't have a
doing
camera?
I've thought about it, but did you ever watch Paranormal Activity? That first one where she's
Mm,
standing next to the bed? That freaked me out
uh-uh.
because I did that to my sister. And so I was
Yeah.
like, I don't want,
You
I
don't
don't want
want to
to see
know.
myself.
Yeah. You don't
What
want to
if
know.
what if I look at the camera and I'm smiling all deranged? That would freak me out. I can't do it. I'm sorry. I can't, I just feel like that's going to happen. But as I'm in this apartment, I was doing what Dunya did, where she's sleepwalking and she feels like there's something in her house that shouldn't be
Yeah.
there, right? Something's in her
Yeah.
apartment. And that was literally me every single night. And I couldn't figure it out. And so I go to work and I was working at some crappy fashion site. And this guy calls me. Now, fashion people always have a tarot reader, an astrologer, a psychic at dinner with you. I don't know why. Okay. It is just a very fashiony thing to do. So 6 months prior, he had come to dinner with me and a publicist and a designer, like whatever. It was just like a group dinner. And he was this cool guy, no big deal. He calls me up out of the blue after 6 months and says, as this is all happening, and I'm, wondering if I have a closet monster. And he's like, listen, my spirit guides are telling me I need to get into your apartment. And I just dropped my phone. I was like, what? What? And so, and I'm like, this is a scam. He didn't want any money. He just really is like, something's wrong with your apartment. I have to get in there. And I was like, please come in, come in, do what
Yes.
you need to do. I don't, oh my God.
What did he
And he did all these
do?
weird things. I
Uh-huh.
can't even explain it because it's like he would do energetic feng shui. And even witnessing it, I still to this day cannot explain to you what he did. He's doing all these things and movement and praying, and he would use your own body to answer questions. Like it's like some kind of kinesiology where your
Mhm.
arm can't bend if you're telling the truth or something, right? So he's using my
Mhm.
arm asking questions, and I'm just
Yeah,
sitting there going,
the muscle response.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
He
God.
figured out. And so the night before he came in, and I think I put it in the book, I can't actually remember because I get book amnesia. I had a dream that if I went into my bathroom and I took a picture in the dark with a flash on in the mirror, I would see what was haunting me.
Oh,
I
that's
didn't
not
do
in the
it.
book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't do
Uh-uh.
it because I don't want to die. That's when you die in
Right.
a horror movie, right? So I was like,
Right.
I'm not doing
It's like
that.
the Bloody Mary
He,
thing. No
yeah,
way.
yeah, like no, I don't want to die. Come on, guys.
No, no.
So I've seen enough horror movies to know better. He comes and he's like, it's coming through your bathroom, and I was like, it was attached
Yeah.
to somebody else. He did something, and it was just like all of a sudden it felt like this heaviness is gone from my apartment, and I'm like, well, that's weird
Yeah.
because I'm still like skeptical, right? So I wanted to be like, okay. He starts saying, "Oh, by the way, there's a message from your dead mother in here," and I'm like, okay, what does mom have to say? So he's going through my bookshelf. Now, Danielle, I need you to see how I organize my books.
Yeah.
I don't. Do you see this mess? Like
Yes.
I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not an organized person. I'm it's creative chaos here, right? he finds, and it's using my arm, asking questions, finds the right shelf, finds the book. It's some book by Camus from that I had for 25 years or whatever, read in university, didn't read it again. And he finds the page and he looks at me and he's like, I'm really sorry, but she wants you to know this. And I was like, okay. And the line, and it stuck with me because it was so wild. It said, yes, it would be a pleasure to see my mother again. And that was the entire line. And I was just like, what just happened?
I can't
What just
believe,
happened?
right. How did he find that?
So
I mean, there's just like,
I
that has to
yeah,
be.
there
There's no way.
I could not logically
Mm-mm.
come up with an explanation for that. There was no way. There was no way.
No.
So that was a changing moment for me, and that's sort of how the Dunya book started. So I wanted to do
Yeah.
something about sleepwalking because it was such a weird, sinister feeling
Yeah.
those few weeks.
Yeah.
So I put a little bit of that. I didn't want to have a psychic in there because I Kismet had a lot of psychic stuff, so I
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
wanted to distance to not the same book over and over. But that was my true story that this came from.
I love that. And I mean, I'm like so woo woo. The older I get,
Okay.
the more woo woo I get. It's crystals, it's
Oh
tarot, it's
yeah. Oh,
smudging.
same,
I
same.
love it. I love it so much. But I love
You
the
know what?
idea
I
that
feel like the older we get, the more fun we have with being weird.
totally.
We just
What else are we
why
gonna
not?
do?
Listen,
we,
if a pretty rock makes you happy,
oh,
it's done its job.
so happy. Makes me so happy. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. And I mean, the idea that the guy could come and find the book, find the page, and that it was about, even about, that it had the word mother. And then it was like, I would
I
love to see my mother.
know.
She's like, yes, you would. You would love to see me again. I love
Yeah.
that.
She's like, yeah, girl. Mhm.
You're missing me. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
I
That's
know.
amazing. I mean,
It
Amina, this
was.
was
It was.
so,
So that was one of those moments when I'm like, maybe I'm a believer now, And so I became a little bit more. I'm trying to like put the doubt away. Like
yeah,
obviously, grain of salt with everything, but there are times when I'm like, huh, maybe that
that's,
actually happened.
it's
Maybe
really
Judge
hard to
Jin's stories are
explain.
true.
Yeah, it's hard to
Yeah.
explain otherwise, right? And also, like, what does the
Yeah.
doubt really do? It's not like we're not, if they say to you, sell everything you own and give me the money, then I think we have to be like, okay, that's not practical. But if they're,
Yes, that's
if,
scammy.
if these gifts are
Use
coming to us,
discernment.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But use discernment. Don't give your money to anybody. But, if you want to dabble and learn about other cultures or entities or tarot or what,
I love it.
don't be afraid of it. Like I think that there's a lot of unlearning we have to do.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
unlearn in so many ways. Like in our 40s, I feel like we need to unlearn all the stuff we did to hide who we were, our weirdness. And I
Yes,
feel like
of
in our
course.
40s, it's like, I'm not hiding it anymore. This is me. Who cares? Right.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of unlearning things like, oh, that's too weird. I don't, that's the,
Right,
no, you
because
want to get into it.
when we
Right
were
now.
young, we was like, you didn't want to be weird. And now I'm like, yeah,
No,
I want to kind of be weird because I don't, what else is there if you're not
now I'm
weird,
like,
right?
bring me a caftan and a turban. I'm going to be as weird as humanly possible. Like, I don't even,
I love
like,
it.
I literally post pictures like this of
I
my dog.
love
Like, I
that.
have
I
no,
know.
I I enjoy being and that's also one of the funny things to me is I'm getting a lot of Pakistani and Indian readers who are
Yes.
like, wow, I feel really seen. And I think that's
I'll
one
bet.
that's amazing. But two, it's
Yeah.
also like I always felt like the black sheep. So it's really refreshing to now all of a sudden, while continuing to be my weird self,
Right.
I'm had this acceptance that I
Well,
don't think I had as a child. And it
I
was
mean,
like,
I
wow,
think
this is cool.
we don't have a lot. There hasn't been, I mean, there's been a fair number of like, Eastern Asian authors I feel like that we've
Yeah.
grown up with, like Amy Chan but I
Oh
feel like
yeah.
in terms of South Asia, there's not been a lot that I have personally grown up with.
No. I mean, there's
I mean,
Jhumpa
really.
Lahiri. I mean, like
Yes. And I love her, of course. Yeah.
the namesake, I swear to
That
God,
was
every time I read
another,
it or
I know.
watch it, it was one of
Hmm.
those call your mom and apologize for being
Yeah.
a terrible American child.
That was
And
such a good
for a
book.
long time, I was like, well, she already told the story I wanted it to tell, which is like
Yeah.
the disconnect of growing up here. But then I was like, I could do it in different ways,
Of
and
course.
that's the thing. Everyone's story, it's how you tell it, right? You can
Exactly.
tell your own Jen story, you can tell your own namesake story,
Yeah.
and it's in the way you execute the story. And hopefully there's gonna be a lot more of us,
I
because
know. Well, I
You know,
mean,
that's the beauty of everything.
it's so, I mean, seriously, this is so fun. This is available right now when you're listening to this podcast. It's available. And you want the gorgeous hardcover version, in my personal
Yes.
opinion, because you want this.
Yes.
And I'm going to be jealous. I'm going to have to get my own copy of this because I love Dunya
I can
Falling.
mail you one. Yeah.
Oh, no, don't you
So,
dare.
yeah.
Don't you
I,
dare.
I
am,
just, you know, and now I'm going to take off every cover of every book because I didn't even know that was on there until the wonderful Megan Collins, that author, posted it
I
online.
love
And I was like,
her.
what are you talking about? And she's
Yes.
like, did you not even look? I was like,
But that's an Amazon
no.
thing. Like, I don't think a
Yeah.
lot of books, I don't think a
Do
lot
that.
of publishers do that. I think it's an
Yeah.
incredible thing. I know Lee Goldberg always covers his to show the
Yeah.
fabulous under
Well,
part.
Lee
But
knows what he's doing. He's not winging
Lee,
it like me. Whereas I'm
Lee,
like, I have a book. Like,
it's
you
a
know.
beautiful book. Now, tell us quickly
Thank you.
what, I know you're working on something else. What
I'm working on something else. I have to give you guys a little caveat. I have long COVID right now, so my
Oh
writing
gosh.
is very slow.
Oh, Amina, I'm so sorry.
I'm going to I'm able to do like 500 words, you know, and then stop and
Yeah.
take a nap, you know. So
Yeah.
we're getting there. It's gonna take me a little while. So if you see me out in public, I will be masked because you don't want to
Yes.
get this, guys. It's been a nightmare.
I'm so
So I'm very
sorry.
slow. But the next book is gonna take on the you know that show The Matchmaker on Netflix, which was the Indian
Yeah.
matchmaker and
Yeah.
basically that, but murder. I thought,
Which,
wouldn't it be great if, you know, somebody was murdering the eligible men?
oh my
And
God.
it starts going into different women's relationship with weddings, because weddings, like, honestly, it's been shoved down my throat since I was like 5. You have to get married, you have to do this. The reason my mom
Yeah.
taught me to cook when I was a child is because that's how she got married to my dad. Is he ate her food and he was in love.
Right. Right.
So it's getting married was always the goal for my mom. For me, I'm 46. I never got married. Like I'm
Yeah.
such a bad daughter.
You're
That I
the
was like,
rebel. The rebel.
I know. I just don't want to live with people.
Yeah.
So I really want to go into
Fun.
marriage and have different women's perspectives on whether marrying into the culture or dealing with their mother-in-law or not marrying or marrying, you know, somebody who's white or, you know, so
Yeah.
it's going to really kind of explore that, but at the same time there will be a lot of murder because that's what
There'll
I
be a
do.
lot of murder. Well,
A
plus the
lot of
fact
murder.
if you're new to Amina, you've got some other books to read before you
Yes.
gotta before we will wait patiently while you
Yes.
get better and 500.
Catch up. Yeah.
Catch
Yes.
up
And I will
to
do my
get caught up, and
I
you
will
will
get it
do
done,
you.
you guys. I'm just it's slow. Like after this, I'm taking a nap because just
I love it.
talking
I
makes me
know.
have to like, yeah.
I'm so sorry that
Oh,
you're not. Well,
COVID.
I have to say, you don't seem like you seem super high energy. So way to fake it till you make
Um,
it, I guess.
I'm literally gonna pass out right after this, so it's great.
Okay. Well, we're gonna let Amina take a nap. In the
Yeah.
meantime, go get your copy of Almost Surely Dead. It's so fun. And I do love the way you braid. It's not fantasy, but there's like some surrealism
Yeah.
with the with.
I wanted to make it realistic enough that okay, you know, these things could happen, but also weird enough that you're like, oh my God, what? It's basically like I like to elicit reactions from people, but in fun ways, not like
It's
shocking, you
so,
know, but
yes.
yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
fun. Well, it's such a fun read, and I did like
Thank
Mindy.
you.
I just gobbled it up and flipping the pages and love it, love it, love
Thank
it.
you.
So,
I
um,
love it. I love hearing that.
so thank you for joining us. And I wore my matching sweater because
Thank
also the
you.
cover is gorgeous. I can't like look at it enough.
Yes.
So,
I only wear black, so I have my pink back here.
yes, you do. And up in your
Because I
wall, there's some pink, and yeah,
yes.
but
Oh, my little niece painted that, so
I love
I had to put it
that.
on my wall.
I love that.
I gotta
Yeah,
represent the kids.
yeah, you do. Good for you. Well, that's
Yeah,
right.
I'm becoming that eccentric auntie now who, you know, is like, children, come to me. You know,
I mean, your siblings are lucky. I have to say, like, that's the best gift you can have is an
yeah.
auntie with no children.
Well,
So,
except when I'm mad at about my sibling, and then I can send really loud toys that, you know, will drive
well,
them
then
nuts, which we all do.
they might make those disappear. If that's what we do. We
Yes,
just,
they might. Yeah.
vanish. They
The
vanish. I don't know what
battery's
happened.
broken. I don't know what
I
happened.
can't get it open. It's broken. That's okay. Don't worry about that. All right,
With a
everyone.
hammer. All right.
Exactly.
Thank you
It fell
so
off the
much.
roof. Everybody, thank you
Yeah.
for joining. I had the best time talking to Amina. Thank you for joining us,
Thank
Amina.
you.
Almost Surely Dead, out now. And this is Killer Women. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.